Hey there, IT crowd. Welcome back to Inspector Toolbelt Talk. And I've been really excited about this podcast. We have back on Sean Garvey from DwellInspect. And I just love having you on, Sean. I don't know if you can tell how excited I am, but welcome back.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate the opportunity to come back to be a repeat guest. And then I'm excited about it too. It's we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is the sales process and marketing.
Yeah, and you're fantastic at that. And you know, it's funny, whenever I'll do a podcast, Sean will pick up on a point and he'll send me a message. And I mentioned a book, Influence, the Principles of Persuasion, or the Psychology of Persuasion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like 2 days later, all of a sudden I get a message and Sean goes, I read that book. And of course Sean read that book. Like Sean reads. And we just had some interesting text messages back and forth, and I've been really excited to talk to you about sales principles, not only sales, but closing. And I liked how you mentioned that when you brought out this idea, because we all like to talk about sales, but we don't always talk about the closing part. So we need to get to the part where we close and then know how to close. And it's all one big linear item.
100%. I mean, if you can't close, then you can't do the inspection, and you have to believe. I hope that everybody believes that they're the best person for the inspection, and so they have to convey that message to their prospective client. Otherwise, you don't get that opportunity. Somebody else gets that opportunity. And I love that you mentioned this book. I've given it away a couple of times. I read it probably 10 years ago, and so I hadn't remembered the details of it. And when you message it, or when you did the little podcast about it, I was not the little podcast, the shorter podcast about it. I didn't want to diminish your podcast. When you mentioned that, I was excited because I hadn't read it in a while and I was due for a reread. You asked me to talk about it and I couldn't find it. And it's because I was using it as a mouse pad on my desk. So I was reading it through osmosis with my mouse on the book. But now you've inspired me to reread it and dig back into the principles of it. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's a really a great book. And it we're not going to do like a book review, but we're going to apply this to the home inspection industry. But there's 6 basic principles that we've talked about on this show in various parts, but never quite nailed down like this, that basically apply to just about any business, but especially to us. Mm-hmm. And just quickly, I'll mention what they are before we talk about them. And I always have a problem with this word, reciprocity. And I know I say that wrong every time. Commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. I want to talk about scarcity first because that's always been my favorite. I never got busier in my business than when I went down to 4.5 days a week.
Interesting.
There was people waiting 3 weeks for us when other home inspectors couldn't find work. And I remember I was just starting out. I was like 2.5 years in, maybe 3. And I'm like, why is my work booming? And then agents were messaging me, hey, you must be the busiest home inspector in the Capital District and this and that. I'm like, all I did was took a half day off, you know? But then I noticed that too, when we took out weekends, people are like, oh, you have to book him during the week. He won't work weekends. I call it the McRib principle. He says it better in the book, but I call it the McRib principle. People lining outside McDonald's for this weird barbecue greasy piece of processed meat in the bun, waiting years for it to happen. And it's just scarcity.
Yeah.
When something is less available.
They're all tied together. One of the other, I don't remember exactly. It may have been in the book or in a podcast that I heard too, but the first iPhone that came out, people were standing in line for it. And a lady traded something like a Rolex, something really expensive, just to move up 2 spots, just so that she could guarantee that she got it. And it's a really interesting principle. They're obviously all tied together, but the truth is people want what they can't have. You can see it in sneaker culture, baseball cards, lots of things that are collectible. If it's rare, for example, a Mickey Mantle rookie card, people are willing to pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah, and that rarity is often created. So, like De Beers, people don't realize this always, but the reason the diamond is expensive is not the actual scarcity, but it's the amount of diamonds that De Beers allows to be on the market. So they have a stockpile of diamonds. And if they release them on the market, diamonds would not be worth as much. It's kind of an interesting thing if you ever want to look it up, if you've never heard of it before. But they create their own scarcity to keep their product valuable.
Isn't that
So we
wild?
as home inspectors sometimes are like, we'll put out these desperate messages. Hey, we have 5 availabilities this weekend. We'll work evenings and we'll work in the mornings. That doesn't create scarcity. That creates a feeling of desperation. And I always thought that was a really great, it's a terrible thing that De Beers does, but it's a great principle for us to learn from. You know, Sometimes we're over eager to expand our schedule. Um, I don't
And
know
Ian,
about you, Sean.
what's that usually coupled with too, right? Where you have X amount of time, the inspector usually couples that with a reduction in price,
Yeah.
right? So they add a discount and they're available. So psychologically, that plays a double-edged sword, right? One, that their time's not necessarily valued enough, and that they're willing to do a discount on it. And don't get me wrong, especially when I was first starting, I probably would have done an inspection for $35 just to get out there.
Hmm.
But as that demand increases, the scarcity or the availability reduces. Both of those things should couple together.
Beautifully said. I like the point about the discount because then we take away the scarcity and add the desperation to it. And what we're talking about is the psychology of persuasion. We
Mm,
really lose all bargaining ability with a client hiring us when we take out our own footing.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like going in to buy a car where we walk in, we're like, I'm desperate, I don't have a car, and I have to be to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're pretty much kind of ruining our negotiating ability.
Yep.
We change the psychology.
Here's that 1996 Civic for $25,000 and 22% interest. That's what
Yeah,
you're going to get.
exactly. Yeah. So that's as soon as I read that scarcity one, that's the one that really stuck in my mind because I still remember that when I cut out weekends, the schedule filled up. When I took out Friday afternoons just so I could have some time to breathe for a short time, my schedule went 3 weeks out, with 2 week contingencies, having 3 week out schedule, people were making changes. And it was just a change in psychology. I didn't add on a new service. It's not like in a 2 week period that I, added on a new certification or something amazing. I just changed people's perception on accident, and it
I
just
mean,
made sense.
I think it's totally realistic. The most inspections I've ever done in a week is 17 or 18, and that's because I was afraid to say no, um, and that's the opposite of scarcity. That's being available, and so being afraid to say no, um, you risk or you have the idea in your head that if you don't service this person, they may go elsewhere, right? And
Hmm.
that's a reasonable risk, but then there's the other side of it is that if you're not available, like you've mentioned a couple times, if you're not available, people want what they can't have. But it has to be coupled. It has to be coupled with all five of the other six principles, because they all layer through there and create a really really powerful message as they go through. And it seems like we're kind of tending towards a little bit of a book review, but I think it's such
Let's do
an
it.
important it's such an important book that it kind of deserves that attention because you can't have one without the other. So you can't just say, "Hey, I'm not available. I only
Hmm.
work Mondays." Then people are going to go find somebody else. But you have to have those layers of demand, um, which include reciprocity, which is just the simple act of giving somebody something. It's also called the Franklin effect, Franklin effect. We may have talked about it the last time. I bring it up a lot, but it's the ability to for people to feel obligated to you when you give them something. Did I say
Hmm.
that right?
Yeah.
Um, for example, like we always coach our team. If anybody ever offers you water, they should accept it. Even if you have a jug of water, if you just had water, if you have iced tea, you don't want it, just accept it. Put it in your bag, and then drink it later. You'll take it at some time. They feel better helping you out. I do the same thing. The FedEx person comes and they drop off one of the packages from Amazon or UPS person, and I can't wait to give them a bottle of water because it makes me feel good. Also makes them feel good too. So there are obligations of that in reciprocity. Um, so it's super important for that one too. In our business, something really really simple could just be, um, you know, a few maintenance tips on a property or the best AC air filters to put on into a house too. Because we have all this knowledge about the house, we could share it. Just share a little bit of it.
Yeah. That was his first principle, the reciprocity.
Mhm.
And you brought it out really well. It's funny that I was laughing in my head as you were talking about the bottle of water, because in the back of my work vehicle, I always brought a giant, like, packages and packages of water that I get from Walmart. So when everybody showed up on a hot day, everybody got a bottle of water.
Mm.
The clients, the agents, the seller, if they were there, somebody walking down the road. But small acts of giving create a psychological effect of owing somebody something.
Connection.
And that creates connection. Exactly. None of us, I don't know if anybody's like me or if you're like me, Sean, but somebody gives me something, I feel this like horrible feeling inside of I need to do something to show niceness back to them. I don't know if it's some childhood trauma, but it's a natural thing. Um, and that's really hard to do sometimes when we're on a phone call, because that's where everything really starts, on a
Right.
phone call or in an email or a text message. That's usually where the lead begins with us and our sales process. If you don't mind me asking, how do you find a way to give to the client, the potential client, so that they feel that feeling of obligation, which ultimately makes them more likely to hire you?
Well, that's a great question. Um, one of the things I learned from the Inspector Tool Belt podcast is one of the things that you can give them is time.
Yeah.
There's an efficiency. Uh, there's a thought of efficiency on phone calls. If you have multiple calls coming in, you want to get them in and booked and on to the next one right away. But these people are making a major, major life decision. They're going to buy a house. They're going to spend a lot of money, and there's a fair bit of risk that they or unknown risk that they don't know about, and they're asking you to help to explain that what that risk might be. Um, and so, the more time that you can spend with them, the more immediate of a connection that you can have with that person. And
Mm.
that's simply just achieved by asking questions, finding out what's important to them, finding out about their last experiences, and quite frankly, if you're in an attic when you're answering phone calls, that's pretty hard to do. So you have to separate that element of scheduling and inspections as you're creating your business.
Yeah, very well said. Um, Time is always one of the best things that we can give. And that does create a feeling of, as we've said on the podcast before, like, why would I call anywhere else? This guy's already
Yeah,
taking care of me. My favorite thing to create reciprocity.
we'll get it.
I feel like I'm a toddler learning how to talk. It's like that other word, similarly. You ever
Oh yeah,
try to say that in the middle of a sentence and it never happens? Um, but I always try to find out what they're concerned with about the house.
yeah,
So the way that happens is they're like, oh, well, it's a basement. I've never had a basement before. I'm from, Arizona, or Florida. I've never had a basement. Oh, well, yeah, let me tell you a couple of pointers. Make sure you get a dehumidifier, look out for these things, and it gives you extra living space potentially as long as you waterproof it. All of a sudden, I've just given them a gift of knowledge of something that, and the best is when they say, nobody's ever explained that to me before. Thank you. If they say that, that deal is pretty well sealed.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hooked,
They're
hooked, and
hooked,
just
and
oh, sorry.
no, no,
No,
no,
go.
they're hooked, but it really just creates a human connection, as you put it before. And that's really what we're looking for.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to chime in and say that mine is mortar. I have a tough time saying that. My word that I fumble. I always want to
Mortar.
say motor. uh, but yeah, I mean that entirely and totally ties in to the ability to give somebody, and they just want to feel important. Everybody wants to feel important. They don't want to feel like they've run through a number of boxes being checked, and they want to call in and tell their story, and they're happy to schedule with somebody that that they like, which is actually happens to be the fifth principle. We're jumping ahead a little bit,
That's okay.
um, but people are more persuaded by those they like. I bartended for a long time in a tourist beach bar in Hawaii, um, and I learned from the bartenders there to reach over the bar top and shake their hands of a tourist they may never see again and introduce themselves. And what they realized is in the tipping culture that we have in the United States, if um, if your client or your customer likes you, they're more willing to give you bigger tips, which is the name
Hmm.
of the game when you're bartending and working. And so it carries through. People are more persuaded by those they like. So people are more willing and wanting to work with companies for people that they like. I screwed that up. People
No,
are
no.
more willing to, people are more willing to work with companies that they like.
Yeah.
But whether it's a cultural connection, whether it's a personal connection or interpersonal connection, whether it's a communication issue, all of those play into the psychology of the client or the customer making that sales purchase.
And that's well said. There was actually a documentary I was watching recently, and it says it showed how businesses in the '80s built up trust campaigns. So they
Mm.
would go on whatever bandwagon people cared about at the time. And in the '80s and '90s, it was pushing for green initiatives and recycling. And so all of these companies that were actually creating the garbage were joining all these recycling initiatives. It brought out to how Amazon did that early on. And even though they did all these initiatives, they ended up increasing their carbon footprint by over 40% that year that they started the initiatives. But it didn't matter to their sales, it increased their sales because they were connecting with people and people liked them better because of the appearance they put forth. Now, that's a manipulation of these principles that we're talking about. We really just want to be genuine, but to be likable doesn't necessarily mean that we're a likable person, because let's be honest, some of us are not as likable as others. If we have some self-awareness, we know, but there are little things we can do to make people like us a little bit more. My HVAC guy, he's probably actually not that great. I found out the other day. I'm like, all right, you got some stuff, right? But he's so likable. Like he came down in my basement. He remembered my expansion tank on my heating unit. I messaged him. He goes, it's that expansion tank. I'm sorry, Ian. He used my name. And he goes, I'll get you in. And it was longer than I expected. But he comes down and he goes, yeah, I knew it was that expansion tank. I made a note of it. Are you still making wine? I'm like, yeah, here's a couple of bottles. I'm like, man, he's not that likable or good at his job, but I like him and he's got me. I'm like, okay, let's do this. But it's important. Likableness equates to trust. We're going to trust people that we like.
Yeah.
How do you do that for your clients, especially on a phone call or when you're trying to close the deal or on an inspection or in any scope of the imagination? How do you create that likableness?
Um, well, I would say in I would say in the terms of an inbound phone call is probably a little bit different. One thing we certainly, and that's going back to spending a fair bit of time about it, but we
Mm-hmm.
ask them questions about that are not about the inspection too. Where are you moving from? Is this their first house? We're trying to get to learn about them. We're also trying to get to learn about their personality too, so we could see if they're like a type A type personality, or if they're very easygoing in that personality as well. So getting to know about people's experience on the phone call helps with the likability of it. Also having a professional nature. Thank you for calling the same way every time. Thank you for calling DwellInspect. This is Sean. How may I help you? Those things matter, except for if, let's say, it's an agent that's calling in, they've called in 3 or 4 times, then we could shift into that. Hey, Ian, nice to hear from you. How can we help you today? And then it creates that familial or friendly connection. One thing you mentioned, and we did definitely talk about this last time, is people love to hear their name, and that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
core principles of how to win friends and influence people. Um, that's so easy to do, and there's so many cues that you can do that. You write the person's name, you look at their order, whatever software you're using, and when you have that, you just mention it 3, 4, 5 times, and they're going to like you. You like him because he asked about your winemaking, and he ends up doing a bad job fixing the AC, but still walking out with a couple of bottles of wine. He's
Yeah,
winning. He's
exactly.
winning. But you've made that connection, and once you've made that connection, you're unlikely to shift that connection unless he makes a major blunder. But you're always going to give him the opportunity to fix himself too.
Yeah.
When you're on the inspection, it's the same thing. We have a couple questions that we definitely ask because we want to make a conversation. Where are you moving from? Do you know the area? Here's some great restaurant recommendations in the area. Um, you know, are your kids in high school or in the area? That type of stuff. Are you playing sports? Who knows? Just questions to get the ball rolling. And once you have the ball rolling, then you could find out more about the person. Maybe they're moving from Tennessee and you have a buddy that lives in Tennessee and loves it. Who knows? But just keep asking those questions to keep the ball rolling, and they're going to end up liking you. But you also have to listen and let them talk. That's really the key.
That's a beautiful point. Let them talk. That's something I've always had trouble with. My team makes fun of me. I talk too much, but but I wrote down a couple of things as you were talking. I like the list of restaurants.
Sure.
That's a good one. Like, oh man, right down the road from here is a great steakhouse. Me and my wife like it. Something that's unique to them. Maybe not necessarily a piece of paper, but I also wrote down there was an interesting thing that because sometimes we think about the client, but we're also, whether people like to hear this or not, we're courting an agent too. There's a home inspector in my area that he's into dog shelters and adopting dogs and things like that, and he does a really nice job with it. But he brings dog treats.
Oh, really?
So, do you have dogs? Oh, here's dog treats. It has his little logo on the bag, gives it to the agents, gives it to the clients, leaves it with the sellers or dog on site. He loves dogs. He gives the treats to the sellers for the dogs, whatever. It's a great way of combining the first principle, reciprocity, with liking. Those two things really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If I'm an agent and somebody hands me, dog treats for my dog, I'm going to have this weird little feeling of, I want to give back to him, and I kind of like him. He took care of my dog. I love my dog. Yeah, those are good principles. I wrote down the restaurant thing though. That's a good one because that's simple, easy to do.
The question is does he call them cat treats if he finds out they like cats? Right?
I'm not sure.
Years on that.
Yeah, I'll have to ask him that. That's a good one. He might need to carry cat treats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He reaches in the bag, grabs out the other thing of dog treats, and hands them the cat treats.
Oh. If he's listening, he knows who he is. Hi, John.
Yeah.
Think of having cat treats. See how that works for you. I'd like to hear. But I've seen comments on Facebook and stuff in the local area of they're like, "Oh, look, I just got dog treats from John and all that." It's so simple and it's nice. We call it a marketing anchor, but it's really just a nice way to combine those two principles.
Oh, I think it's such a great idea, and it's low cost, right? I would assume that it's low cost.
Oh yeah.
But it's people want to like you. People want to enjoy the service that they got, and you have to work real hard not to like them. But if you find a way to kind of align with their principles, and whether they're cat people or dog people or whatever, but to give a gift for them to give to other people, that's an instant connection. You call it an anchor or a hook, but it does a really, really great job of making that connection. They're going to want to like you. It's great.
There's an added bonus too, because we're not infallible. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like this. I totally popped a GFCI in a house, and the freezer, it was on the same line as the freezer. Classic home inspector goof up. You don't know it's outlets down in the basement, and it pops it up in the garage where the freezer is. Fortunately, the sellers, they let the agent know before anything really melted. I was able to go over, said, "Hey, I'll be right there," and I popped the brake back on. Everything was okay. Not a single person got mad at me.
Yeah.
In fact, the sellers thanked me, and they're like, "You seem so nice. We wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt." And the buyer and seller's agent, they're like, "Isn't Ian awesome? He went over there and turned the GFCI back on." And the buyers were like, "Oh, he is awesome." And I'm looking at this email chain. I'm like, I kind of doofed up, but everybody's like crushing on me here. But I had built a rapport with them in that 2-hour period where they liked me. And so when stuff happens, when, something goes wrong, people will be more apt to defend you. They're like, "That doesn't sound like so-and-so. That doesn't sound like Sean. Sean would never do that." And Sean would come back and fix it. Whereas if we were some kind of just show up, do our inspection cold and walk away, people would curse our name a lot easier. Mm. Have you ever had a situation where people defended you like that? Or
100%. And you actually bring up a really interesting point that a lot of people forget about when they're trying to build their businesses. We really have 4 opportunities to impress 4 different parties. You have the buyer's agent, the sellers, and the seller's agent. And you're in the seller's home for 3 or 4 hours. So you have a huge opportunity to get them to like you. We do things a little bit differently. We often start our inspection in the kitchen. The sole purpose for that is that we want to give the client, sorry, not the client, we want to give the seller the opportunity to get to know our process, to get to like us, and to let their guard down a little bit.
Hmm.
Home inspections are really intrusive, really, really intrusive. We're in people's homes, which is their castle. We're in their closets. We're running their sinks. We're finding problems it's an awkward moment. And so you need to bring that guard down as fast as you can to get them to like you. And the same thing, you do that, you're setting them up, you're telling them on what's going on, you're setting your expectations. You're in the kitchen so that they can see that you're human, and you're walking through and you're getting to know them. Where are you moving to? Do you have any good restaurants you like in the neighborhood? uh, that type of stuff. Just ask them questions and create quick connections. Um,
That's a
sure.
that's a
And
beautiful
yes,
point.
without a doubt, I've spent more time in my life looking and tripping GFCIs than any human should. Uh, and it's always the one you can't find. That's the problem, of course.
Oh, that's the worst when you can't find it, and then you curse the builder's name when you find it. You're like, why in the world would it be here? Like this makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the bane of the existence of a home inspector. But
Totally.
I really like that. Starting in the kitchen. I always went right to the basement. The settlers aren't always, most of the time, aren't home when we do an inspection in my area. But I really like that. Even if it's just the buyers, humanize it. The kitchen's
Yeah.
where people gather, where they connect naturally, so it puts you in a different light. That's interesting. I have to remember that one. How about the commitment and consistency? That was an important one. Strive to remain consistent with our previous commitments and behaviors. What does
Yeah.
that mean to you?
That's that one is key on a number of levels, but most specifically on the inbound call, or when people are looking or interviewing you for a job, because that's what an inbound call is a job interview. And so in there, you're just trying to get them to commit to one thing, one small thing. So old sales technique is to start them to get to saying yes, and the faster you get them to say yes, the more likely you are to get a commitment. Um, the other element of that is that, so you just want them to book a home inspection, right? And now you have upsells. I think you have septic inspections, sewer scopes, mold, radon, termite, pool. Keep going down the list, whatever exists in there. Um, the first thing you want to do, especially if they're undecided, is to get them to commit or say yes to one little thing, which is the home inspection. Take that opportunity later, to explain the other services that you could provide to them. If you
Hmm.
hit them with, I don't know, a $2,500 bill when you've added up all the other stuff, they're likely to do their natural reaction, which is pull back.
Hmm.
If they pull back, you've lost your chance at them. So if got them to commit to just the home inspection, you can add all the other stuff later if they want it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a really great principle. My favorite add-on, I like to save some add-ons to on-site. We're almost always radon because we're already there, and the agent's standing there. We're in the basement doing the review, and it's like, okay, so just to confirm you don't want radon. Okay, let's put radon on. I trust you now. Or sewer scope. We're already there. This kind of looks a little sketchy, and it's better to add on later on, even weeks up to or days up to the inspection rather. I always found that a couple things that I worked for me were when I was talking to people, I would ask them to go to my website while I talk to them.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's a very very micro version of this principle. So now they're on my website. I'm like, look down halfway through the page, and you'll see what we inspect. And then I'm saying the same thing I would have said anyways. And sometimes I'll be like, hey, that question you have? I'm on the road. Would you mind filling out this contact form right there next to that section? And just say, hey, Ian, this is Joe. My question was this. I'll get it right on my phone. I'll get right back to you. I was combining two principles with that. Number one, finding a reason for follow up. But that's a different principle outside of what we're talking about. But the other thing was now I've obligated him. He's already asked a question. He's filled
Yeah.
something out.
Oh yeah.
And the principle is like getting someone to sign a petition. If you can get someone to sign a petition for what they care about, the next thing you've asked them for, you're likely going to get a yes for. You have to be, so, if you want something bigger, like, well, now do you want to demonstrate with us? Better than a 50-50 shot that they're going to say yes at that point because they already signed a petition. So there's lots of ways to apply that. Have you found any ways that work or don't work for you otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, what you just said was really impressive too. I just had a wow moment on it, right? Like they've already probably gone and looked at your Google reviews to validate you. They've
Mm-hmm.
gone to your website and they've gone, oh, he's got a great website. He should start a website making business. Um, a little plug for you. And then the other element, but then you're bringing them back to the website so that
Mm-hmm.
they can have something relatively or at least digitally tangible, so that they can read it while you're reading. And that was like a huge wow moment when I heard that. So that's really impressive. Yeah, I mean, it's the other element too is that once you where you were speaking of, once you get them to say yes for something small, they feel socially obligated. Like it's the air filter when you're getting your oil changed, right?
Yeah.
You pay the $50 to get the oil changed, and they offer the air filter for $50, but you're already there, so you're just gonna say sure, do it. Otherwise, the other obstacle is to go somewhere else down the street and pay $42 for the same air filter or whatever it is. So you're just trying to get people to say yes, and you're setting all those personal hooks, lining up all the other principles for it.
That was the best illustration of of that principle, was the upsell of the air filter when you
Yeah,
get your oil changed. Yeah. They're using the same principle. You already said yes to everything else. We're here. And even when they bring out the air filter, they're just like, it doesn't look that bad, but they're already there. Just say
yeah.
yes. You said yes to everything else.
They all look bad every time they pull them out.
Yeah. When have you seen a clean air filter?
They're white. Of course, they're going to come out and look dirty.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I'm going to steal that one. That was really great.
Yeah,
And you actually touched on the third principle, which is social proof. And this is
yeah,
one that our industry is very familiar with. And but being familiar with a car doesn't necessarily mean we know how all the inner workings work. How many of us have taken apart a fuel injector or actually know how our transmission works and all the gears and everything inside? Just because we know it exists and it's important doesn't mean we understand it. So what's social proof, Sean?
social proof is where you're looking towards others to validate your purchasing decision. There's so many different avenues with it. Whether it's whether your friend just got a car, so that tells me that it's a good car, so I want that car.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you go to the website and people have packages or bundles, whatever you're calling them, and you have the low, middle, and then the high value package, and the middle one says most popular. If
Mm-hmm.
you go to any software as a service website, they basically all have that principle. And the most popular one is the most popular decision, so that's the one I should choose. Or even at restaurants where they box the one they want you to buy.
Mm-hmm.
So whether the restaurant I worked in, the fish tacos were always boxed, and that's what they wanted you to buy because they were good. So social proof is using that, those techniques, testimonials, reviews, even other endorsements to help other people feel good about their decision to use you, um, or to work with your business, I should say.
Yeah, that's a fantastic overview of it. I know I do that on Amazon all the time when I see
Oh yeah,
most purchased. That's the first one I go to. It's got a little
yeah,
banner on it. Why is this the most purchased? You know, and I'll still read the reviews and stuff, but I think most of us are too reductive with this principle. We know we need social proof, and so we say, "Well, I have lots of reviews." That is a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it.
right.
I still find that testimonials aren't completely dead. Like years ago, you'd have testimonials. Somebody write you a testimonial, write it on a piece of paper. I'd have them scribble it on a sticky note if I could, and then I would just transfer it to a digital and take a picture of it to make sure that I could verify that it was, and all this stuff. But people still care about that. They care about reviews, but they also care about their peers. And one thing that has always brought me work is forums.
Mm.
And I still find myself in various versions of my businesses on forums like Reddit, local forums. Like there's one around here where everybody does certain things in a certain city, and so they're always talking about who's the best and where to go to eat and who to hire. Those forums are extremely popular. Have you noticed yourself, or and is that big in your area or no?
It might be big. We haven't specifically used forums in that respect. I mean, maybe a little bit on Reddit, something to that extent, but um, I don't specifically know. We haven't been able to track any specific business as a result of it. So that's an interesting avenue. Thank you for sharing
It
that.
Yeah, it's hard to track. It really is,
Yeah,
and it takes a little bit of cyber stalking. But like Reddit's the one I'll just mention because it's one of the bigger ones. But sometimes I'll find threads, or you can start threads, and you don't want to be a weirdo about it. But like, hey, who's the best home inspector? And all of a sudden, 5 comments down, we're advertising ourselves. We want to be natural about it, but we can start talking about home inspections. If we're in Phoenix, can say, hey, does anybody find that there's a lot of termites lately in the Phoenix area? We're home inspectors and we're looking to just see if anybody else has noticed this, because we've
sure.
noticed it a lot. Now it becomes social proof. People start interacting with us. They say, oh, I used you guys years ago. You did a great job. You actually found our termite issue, or whatever it happens to be. Some of those other avenues can be more reliable than Google reviews. I was reading an article not long ago about how, is it Gen Alpha or Gen Z? I forget. The early 20s people, they're starting to rely less on Google reviews.
Mm,
And even younger millennials, which in their early 30s, they're starting to say, that's not really our big thing. When they see 1,000 5-star reviews, they're kind of like, okay, that's good. What else is out there?
yeah,
You know?
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, now that it sparked some occurrences, but it was a little bit ago. But next door is a good one too,
Next door.
especially in new build communities. Usually around the 11-month or 1 year warranty, 11-month inspection, 1 year warranty, whatever you want to call it. But it's a total social proof. Hey, does anybody have a good inspector? It's coming up. Or, hey, I use these guys. You should use them too. And that's the other element of social proof is I've got a guy. He's awesome. You should use him. It's
Yeah.
the same. It's the same exact reason on a larger scale. We don't have these budgets, but why sports celebrities are connected with brands, because um, if that sports celebrity, I couldn't think of one at the moment. Michael Jordan uses it. It's good enough for him. It's good enough for me. Right.
Yeah. Man, that's perfect. I forgot about Nextdoor, and that is actually a really good forum. And there's other ones too. And obviously, this is encompassing of social media, and that's why we use different social media for different age groups. Facebook is not dead. Facebook is still big. It's important for SEO too, but
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, it's the 40 and up club. They're buying their second home, or they're moving away, downsizing. If you're 65 years old and retiring, you're going to be using that to ask people, hey, who's a good home inspector? TikTok is going to be for the younger crowd, the 20 to 30 years old, and 30 to 40 is going to be something like Instagram, which is less social of the social media. But all of that's really important to have people behind you. Join local groups. I love doing that, especially on
Yeah.
Facebook. I belong to all the little local groups in the area, and I'll talk about home inspector things, and I'll talk about, if somebody has a question, I'll answer it. Again, you just got to avoid being a big creeper about it. Like, you don't pretend to be somebody else. Everybody can smell that from a mile away.
For sure.
You're pretending to be John Doe from down the road, and you're really just try to guerrilla market home inspection. It's like, just, hey, I'm a home inspector. If it's worth it to you, this is what I found, 2 streets down from you. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Give them something, and now there's social proof. You know,
Yeah, and to piggyback off that in social media too, there are so many different avenues of social media that are underutilized. One light bulb moment I had from social media was somebody told me that when they go to out of town and they're looking for a restaurant, typically I'd go to Yelp. I'd go to Yelp and read some of the reviews and see who has all the high ratings and 5 stars. Look for social proof in that avenue. They said that they now go to Instagram, look up
Hmm.
restaurants in the area, look at the plates that are photographed on there, and by the influencers that are on there, and they make their decision based on that. So a slightly younger generation than me is using social proof through aesthetic pictures in there. I thought that was really interesting. And so same thing occurs with home inspectors in different avenues too, right? Like you can use TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Yelp. What else did you say? There's another.
Facebook and TikTok. You already mentioned those, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Reddit. That's it. So you
Reddit.
can
That's
use
it.
all of those all the way down the chain, but they all have different uses and different target audiences. So that element of social proof to get that message out there is going to become more challenging as you're talking to different audiences.
I knew I was excited about this podcast for a reason. You've already given me 3 things that I've written down for me, so thank you for that. I didn't know people were using Instagram like that. I'm going to try that for a restaurant just to see how that
Yeah.
works.
I mean, you're looking with your eyes, right? You eat with your eyes. So you're looking through there. But to me, like I never even thought that was feasible. And when they brought that up, it just opened the eyes of possibility for the different avenues that you may be trending in.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And our last principle, authority. So basically the principle is people are more likely to follow the lead of perceived experts or authority figures. So how do you create authority, Sean? What's your way of doing that?
Yeah, there's a couple different avenues. One thing inspectors are really good at is becoming really knowledgeable about their craft. I think I know that we're an industry of integrity. People don't get into this because they don't want to do a good inspection. People get into this for a certain reason where they want to protect somebody or something happened to them and they want to protect the next person. So it's really a noble profession. I've always believed that. And so we become typically really good at doing inspections and gather a wealth of information. The object or the challenge that presents beyond that is to present that to the potential client. And so to get in front of people to do that. So authority is shared by, in the past it would be a book, writing a book. But now we can do blogs. You can do blogs on your website. You can display that social proof on the internet. You can do it on Instagram, TikTok, or even Facebook, whatever your target demographic is. And that can be done by writing. It could also be done by pictures with captions, and it can also be done with video too. You have all 3 of those sources or ability to do that on the internet itself. Podcasts are a great social proof. I think podcasts are the new book, and allows you to become authority. People look up to that. If you have an hour of intelligent conversation, people think that you're an authority on there. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. I'm out.
No, those are all fantastic. Those were all the points that I had. Podcasting, I've always said, if a home inspector can actually get out there and podcast, don't try to be famous. It's basically painting you as an authority. So if I look you up, I'm like, hey, what about Sean at DwellInspect? And I've actually seen and heard your podcast, Sean. So it automatically, when I first asked you to be on the podcast, I'm like, this guy knows his stuff. He's an authority. And you do know your stuff, but you were able to present it in a way that everybody knows that you knew your stuff. So you become an authority on it. Blogs are funny. Blogs are actually, we're going to do a podcast on optimizing your website for ChatGPT coming up. And blogging has actually become even more important, interestingly. But it's more important for validity, in my opinion. If I go to somebody's website and they have a blog post every month, I don't read it. I don't read my dentist blog. I don't read my mechanic's blog, but that they have it, I'm like, whoa. Oh, they write something every month. They're really involved. They know their stuff. Little things like that are the bricks that build the castle of our authority. It's not doing one thing or the other, and then 6 months later, we're like, nothing came out of it. They're all bricks. We build our authority over time with a lot of different things. I like your point.
Description.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. You describe the bricks, and I do like the video one. That really is important. And I've seen videos with your lead inspector in them too. Well done. Is he going to go viral and represent Nike here in 6 months? No, but I don't think he cares. Yeah, maybe he will. Yeah, he starts having wear Nikes in the videos.
Yeah.
But if I'm a home buyer and I'm watching him, they're informative. They're just long enough to be informative, but not so long that I stop watching it. and are on real inspections, it gives me authority and it gives me confidence in them.
Yeah.
And they're easy to do. What is it? 30 seconds to 60 seconds?
Yeah.
That's what most of us shoot for. That's a lot of authority. Yeah.
Yeah. Andrew does a great job with that. You want to keep it about under a minute. That way you can hit all platforms. YouTube Shorts being under a minute. The others have longer, but then you only have to do one and you don't have to make edits from it. And then you want to grab people's attention within the first couple seconds. We're certainly not perfect at it, but we're always trying to get a little bit better on it. That's the opposite of what I thought you were going to say about blogs. I thought you were going to say that they were ineffective. We write blogs and then we just put a section of the blog in the newsletter. And so whether they read the whole thing or not, it's still a psychological authority connection. Meaning that they'll read the subject, maybe read the first couple of lines and say, these guys know what they talk about. And that's really all people want in the inspection is to have confidence that you've done a great job. And once they know that you've done a great job and you're knowledgeable and you're not necessarily making mistakes, all that other stuff comes into fruition too.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people say that, like blogging is not important, or like I hear the same people that say that, like being a member of Internashi is important. Those logos don't mean anything. I'm like, they mean something. Are people going to sit there and research every logo you have or every certification? No, but it's about creating that warm fuzzy feeling, that authority. Like, oh, well, he has a blog every month. Oh my goodness, he has videos. Oh, look at him on social media. He's got more logos and certifications than I can count here. All of a sudden, we've taken our bricks and we've built this big castle of authority. I mean, even if somebody can pick away at a couple of those bricks, it doesn't matter. That castle's there. And it's that really is important. I actually find that the authority one is probably, in my opinion, one of the keystones, if not the keystone, to a lot of this. Because once you have that authority, the rest of it, you can build right around it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But,
I mean, I think, and it's important communication too, right? Like, not all inspectors are super experienced in the trades. Not all inspectors are old. Some are younger and have subjective or theoretically less experience in that too, as well. So it's being able to communicate all of that to create authority. Sometimes age is an instant authority in this business, right? Because they've been in the trades for 20 or 30 years. But not everybody has that, at least at first, right? We're all getting closer to that.
Yeah. We all get it eventually, Sean.
Right. It catches up to all of us at some point. But there are certainly different ways of communicating that authority. And what you said right there is perfect. The different associations, the badges from Internachi certainly do help bridge that gap and communicate it really quickly. Because it's really hard to communicate some of that really quickly.
Yeah. Sean, this was great information. Man, we could talk about this on 5 more podcasts because this is just jam packed, and I've always had a lot of respect for the business you run, the business you do, and the authority that you have within our industry. So
thank you
very much for being on and talking about these with us today. I appreciate it.
Ian, thank you so much for having me. This was a ton of fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah, let's do it again. I love it. Everybody, thank you for listening in, and we'll catch you next time on Inspector Toolbelt Talk.